Okay, so welcome back to part four of my reaction to God Bless Bitcoin. So we will now talk about Bitcoin as a property, and we will talking about property rights. Okay, so let's
Currency is
continue.
continually collapsing.
Not only does Bitcoin allow people to be their own bank, it is the only form of money that gives us digital property rights.
Bitcoin is very transformative because it gives us a new set of building blocks. We don't know all the things that we can build with those building blocks, but what we do know is that it solved maybe the oldest problem in humanity, which is how do I secure my property in a way that can't be stolen?
The ability of a person to have full rights to the money that he has earned, that he has brought into being, without interference of any more powerful entity, whether it is a band or a gang or a government or anything else that could use force against him. That's a huge advantage and a huge asset.
Coming from the former Soviet Union, my parents brought my family over 1989. I was 7 years old, along with my sister, and we left the Soviet Union because many people know it was a very oppressive regime. Things were scarce, goods were scarce, people weren't really free to do what they wanted, information was very strictly controlled. So what I found out is that when we left, the government was able to exchange about $100 per person. For my family of four, that meant we left with $400 in our pockets. And that's all we could take with us. Otherwise, our option was to exchange these Soviet rubles on the street, which basically had no value. Had we had Bitcoin back in the Soviet Union in 1989, we could have actually taken our hard work and everything that we had done with us, that value that we earned.
If you show up at the airport with all of your money in any other nation state, they either arrest you, they send you home, or more likely, they take your money and send you home, right? Try to walk through an airport in most countries with $1 million of gold in your backpack and see how far you get. You can't even walk through with more than 10,000 of anything. Governments have captured the capital of their citizens, and if they can force you to use the currency while they've got the capital captured, they can simply seize as much of your capital as they wish by debasing the currency more aggressively. Bitcoin reverses that balance of power because now for the first time you could actually store your capital in a hardware wallet or in a set of private keys, and you don't have to move it physically through the airport or on a ship. You can actually move it through cyberspace with 12 words. You could send all the digital capital in the country over a WhatsApp message. There's a famous phrase, an armed society is a polite society. When the citizens are disarmed and the government's the only entity with the guns, then one person can simply steal all the property. And when 95% of the citizens are starving to death, that's not a problem. As long as 1% of the people have the guns and you feed the 1% with the guns, you could still control the country. And that's what happened in many nations, in North Korea, in Cuba, in Zimbabwe, etc. Bitcoin economically arms everybody. Like, for the first time in history, you can fight back. You actually can store your economic energy and protect it with cryptography and a 300 exahash wall of encrypted energy, and no mayor or governor or country can seize that from you, no matter how much weaponry they have. And what happens then? If I can't take it from you by a force, I have to negotiate with you. And that means instead of just losing everything, I'm going to try to sweet talk you or negotiate you into giving me half. And we call that tax.
If we want to get people out of poverty, we need to give them property rights. We need to give them savings that is theirs. We need to give them a way to build wealth, to build businesses, and to keep that wealth and to pass it on to their children so they can build more wealth. And that is what Bitcoin provides.
Bitcoin enables digital property rights for the first time because it's the world's first digital fair instrument. It allows people to have not only ownership, but control. But what also is essential to a free society is economic freedom. If you don't have the choice of how you spend or save your money, you don't live in a free society.
Before cryptocurrency, you needed a bank to allow you to build something and put it on the internet. But now we have money native to the internet, which allows the whole world to participate in a global economy.
Ultimately, Bitcoin is a means to fight tyranny, to fight corruption. When you take control of the monetary system out of the hands of a few and make it available to everybody, it is a safer system.
Bitcoin provides a way.
We'll just go over some of the points there because there's a lot of things that we're talking about. So, for the first time, we will have ownership of an asset where we will have full rights of that asset. So nobody is controlling that asset. You're not paying any tax for that asset, for example. So full ownership because you have full control. You own the asset. You own the secret key. Only you can have access to that. Okay. And as what Michael Saylor was saying, BTC is our economic arm against anyone. So it allows us to fight back from those who will take those kind of assets from us. Okay, it protects us with cryptography. So nobody can take it away from us, no matter what weapon they use. Okay, so I don't know if someone will put a gun on my head. I don't know, but as long as I will not tell them my secret key, they won't be able to have access to my assets. Okay. And I also would like to mention about this 10,000K limit cash that you can carry when you travel, because it's really like why do we have to limit people's ability to carry cash around? What if I need to go to a country where digital access is limited or there's no banking system, and the only way I can go there, for example, if I need to do a medical procedure or I don't know, rescue operation, and I need some cash, then why limit people to 10K? So it's just ridiculous in my opinion. Okay, so but that's how the world is controlling us. They control our properties. They control also our movements. Okay, so I'll just want to go back to that concept of ownership, even in business, because that is very important in a democratic society. Just we'll just go back to this one.
Get people out of poverty, we need to give them property rights. We need to give them savings that is theirs. We need to give them a way to build wealth, to build businesses, and to keep that wealth and to pass it on to their children so they can build more wealth. And that is what Bitcoin provides.
Okay, so that's a very important concept. You know, the property rights. If you look at the communistic or communism, so when there is no one owning anything, no owning an asset, the tendency is no one will also take care of that asset. So one example is I always would like to go back to a house that you own versus a house that is rented. So who do you think will take care of the house much better? The one who owns her house, or the ones who is just renting somebody's house. So human nature, as human beings, our usual behavior is to take care of something that we own. So we will feel more accountable. There is a lot more accountability when we actually own that thing. Okay, so when we own an asset, we become more accountable. So it's the same with business, for example. So if you let people own their own business, then they will take care of and make sure that that business will grow. Okay, if they are just managing somebody else's business, they probably will just, you know, they will not perform as harder as or much better than somebody who owns the business. Okay, so that's why the concept of franchising is very important in the business world, because when you own a lot of branches and you will only assign managers to take care of that branches, it's not the same as branches that are actually owned by somebody, because that person who owns that branch will definitely make sure that the business is taken care of, and make sure that the business will grow. So it's that concept of property rights. Okay, so if you own something, you will take care of that. If you don't, if it's a common kind of ownership like communism, nobody will take care. So have a look at the buildings owned by governments, for example. Um, the people who work there will probably not care as much as um, a, a building who is owned by um, a private individual, okay, or maybe corporations. I just thought that private corporation buildings are, they just look more nicer and modern and cleaner, and so you can feel and sense that it's somebody, that people are taking care of the building. Anyway, so it's just me commenting on the concept of private ownership, which is very important when you want that thing, the one that you own, to be taken care of and owned. So for the first time we had Bitcoin, we will have full property rights. Okay, so and that is good. That is good for everyone. That is good for somebody who is starting a business. That is good for somebody who is trying to grow his or her assets.
Bitcoin enables digital property rights for the first time because it's the world's first digital fair instrument. It allows people to have not only ownership, but control. But what also is essential to a free society is economic freedom. If you don't have the choice of how you spend or save your money, you don't live in a free society.
Before cryptocurrency, you needed a bank to allow you to build something and put it on the internet. But now we have money native to the internet, which allows the whole world to participate in a global economy.
Ultimately, Bitcoin is a means to fight tyranny, to fight corruption. When you take control of the monetary system out of the hands of a few and make it available to everybody, it is a safer system.
And Bitcoin provides a way for the abundance gained from technology to be broadly distributed to society that is aligned with the best in humanity rather than the worst in humanity.
Bitcoin is value that everyone can recognize. And already 100 million people recognize that value. There was this moment, I was sitting there and I put Bitcoin on a ledger and I looked at the ledger and I thought, This is my money. My money's here. It's not sitting out there in some bank, waiting for some bank run to run it out of business or allowing some banker to make a fortune off my money. It's right here. I know where my money is. I think that gives power to the individual. I think that gives power to the people.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very powerful statement when you look at your cold wallet, so Trezor or Ledger. So when I have my Ledger, I look at it and say, this is my asset. My money is here, not in my bank or somewhere else where there is a risk. There is a risk of bank runs, you know? You know what happens to the banking system? So they do keep our money, but because of this fractional reserve kind of policy, where they are only allowed, I think, 10, even 5% of your money to be kept in their balance sheet, okay? And the rest invest it to somewhere else to make money out of that money, basically. So that is why when there's a bank run, the bank will collapse, and because the money is not there, it's kept somewhere else, it's invested somewhere else. So and then the bank will have nothing to pay you back. So yeah, so it's very nice when you can actually hold with your ledger or with your Trezor your money. So nobody is controlling it. You have the private key. You have the rights, the full rights. You have the full control. You can do whatever you want with this, and yeah. So it's amazing. It's for the first time in the history of humanity, we have full ownership of our property, of our assets.
This is why people find so much hope in Bitcoin. It gives us back control over our time, our energy, and our lives.
So I think the most transformative aspect of Bitcoin is really almost a social economic experiment. You know, can all the users of a money be in control of the monetary system, right? Or do we need a handful of elected people to tell us what the monetary policy should be? If a majority of the users of Bitcoin and the people running it decide to change the monetary policy, they can.
Bitcoin solved decentralization and security. And it was the first time that decentralization and security has ever been solved.
And for anyone that's gotten into Bitcoin, reading the Bitcoin white paper is usually the inflection point where it's a 9-page, really easily understood document that lays out what's now the whole cryptocurrency ecosystem. The fundamental idea that we can have a financial system where individuals are really in control of their money. You don't have to have all of the intermediaries that were problematic in the 2008 financial collapse. When I saw that as an engineer, I thought, wow, this is one of the most empowering things that I could imagine.
The most important thing is the way it reorganizes.
Okay. So yeah, I had goosebumps when I read the white paper. So the thesis by Satoshi Nakamoto. It's only 9 pages, but oh boy, that's probably the one of the most important theses in the history of humanity. We will the history will judge us or that thesis later on, but for me, it's a very significant thesis. This will bring about a lot of good to humanity. So if you haven't read the paper, just go through it. It's only 9 pages. It's easily understood, even if you're not a developer. So you have, the basic concept: double spending, decentralization, security, and how all of this is, put together in that 9 pages. It's amazing.
The most important thing is the way it reorganizes human behavior, right? Because for basically thousands of years, most things happened in a trusted way. You had to trust somebody in order to conduct a transaction. You had to trust somebody in order to store your wealth. And now you don't. You can use Bitcoin and you don't actually have to trust anyone. You just have to trust the algorithm. You have to trust the software code. You have to trust the rules of the system. And so Bitcoin is this very transparent system based on code and based on rules. It doesn't require you to trust a bank, doesn't require you to trust the government, doesn't require you to trust your neighbor even. You can use it to do business with an enemy. You can use it to do business with a friend.
I think the fact that no one can control.
Okay, I have a lot to say about that because I'm back in the Philippines. I have some savings, and I'm starting out some small businesses, and so there were like starting out 3 or 4 businesses, and of course one of them is not good because this person that we entrusted our money to do business has disappeared. So it's kind of like estafa in the Philippines, kind of fraud. Um, so there was it's a pity and it's sad because you trusted the person, you provided them with money, support in terms of knowledge, advice, and education and all because this is a young person that I have provided money for him to start or grow his business actually. Okay, so it's really sad. So that's why human nature is somehow we're we're corrupt in a way. So we cannot help but we have to fight against corruption even within ourselves. Okay, so that is why yeah, the concept of trustless, the system, you don't have to trust each other. It's the system will verify the transactions for us. So that really rings uh, bells, uh, ring a bell to my ear. Okay, so it's sweet to me, um, after experiencing all these dealings with people who pretend to be a trusted person only to run away from your contract. Okay, so it's I just feel so sad about it because your only intention is to help them out. Your only intention is to for them to grow because you think that their success is also your success. Okay, so everything was done in good faith. Everything was based on trust. Everything was at first it was kind of like based on friendship. So that is why not even friends, not even family, not even partners, you cannot sort of like fully entrust them with all your assets. So that's why I can say in Bitcoin I trust, in Bitcoin we trust. Because I don't have to trust you. It's the system. It's a trustless system. Okay, so we don't have to trust each other. Even if we don't agree with another, even if we are enemies or something like that, we don't have to trust because the system will verify everything for us. So that I really love that concept. Especially now that I'm fighting a battle against people who are committing fraud against me. So yeah, it's it's tough out there to do transaction to do business with people. It's tough. So ooh, Bitcoin will solve a lot of problems in the world.
Or manipulate Bitcoin, and that everyone has to play by the same set of rules and there's no rulers. I think that makes it inherently very moral. There's no one who gets a special unfair advantage in Bitcoin, and that's different than the current system we have today, where who's
Yeah, it's a moral solution to the immorality in the world. the immorality of fraud, the immorality of um, surveillance, the immorality of intrusion, of not respecting private property, and so many other immoral stuff around the world. Okay.
I think the fact that no one can control or manipulate Bitcoin and that everyone has to play by the same set of rules and there's no rulers, I think that makes it inherently very moral. There's no one who gets a special unfair advantage in Bitcoin, and that's different than the current system we have today, where whoever's closest to the money printer basically disproportionately benefits from it. And so I think Bitcoin can make the world a better place by making it a more fair and inclusive system, and will help fix some of the division, polarization, and the wealth concentration we see today.
There is so much Bitcoin can heal. It can even prevent those in power from being able to take our money or silence us.
The first thing that happens when you go against the government, that is a dictatorship, they will take away access to your money. And it doesn't even have to be a dictatorship.
Justin Trudeau in Canada worked to use banks to cut off money for truckers. They were protesting COVID restrictions that were put on them in Canada, and they were using the banks to do this. This was actually considered illegal in Canada, but nevertheless, Trudeau did it. Banks complied with it, and they started choking off the protest by restricting the money.
The government taking people who had committed no crime, who were not charged with a crime, who were, of course, never convicted of a crime, and punishing them for criticizing government policies, and punishing them in a way that was almost worse than imprisonment, because if you can't get at your bank account, you can't feed your children, you can't buy gasoline, you can't pay the mortgage on your house, because if the government has the capacity to starve you to death, to keep you from getting work, to keep you from shelter, then it has license essentially for any atrocity. And at that point, I began looking more seriously at Bitcoin as a currency that could be used to escape the government surveillance systems.
When working in Moscow, when our bank accounts were blocked by the regime, we were able to continue our activities thanks to Bitcoin savings. Basically, Bitcoin gave us freedom of action and freedom of speech at that time.
The US government has the discretionary ability to effectively turn off the savings of whole nations at a time. That's what they did with Afghanistan, for better or for worse, after the Taliban took over. That's what they did with Russia in February of this year. Again, for better or for worse. You might say, well, these are the strategic objectives of the United States. That's fine, but what they are doing is confiscating the savings of entire nations. And it's just a fundamentally unfair dynamic, right? You are blending political objectives with people's savings, and that leads to misery, in my opinion.
Governments can, at any time, decide they don't like you or me.
Yeah, this concept of sanctioning the entire nation because you're at war with them, or because you don't agree with what they're doing, is it's sad, because it's the citizens who suffer. Even though you're sanctioning the government, but because you're cutting off the flow of money in that country, then basically it's not just the governments who will suffer in that country, but also their citizens, the ordinary people. And that's for me, it's collateral damage. It's not good.
Or somebody else, and sanction. If we called sanctions what they are, right, financial sanctions, starving children, you're basically cutting off supplies of goods and services to a population, we probably wouldn't like it as much. But when we call about economic sanctions, whether it's Venezuelans or Russians or anybody else, governments almost glamorize it because they're like, well, we know better. We know what's best. But censoring someone because they have different views or different lifestyle or different perspective on how the world should interact, it's not really our job.
So PayPal came out with that policy where they said if you say anything online we don't like, misinformation, which of course, as we found out for the last 2 years, what was labeled as misinformation actually came true. But if you do misinformation, they can pull $2,500 out of your account. It's not your money. Of course, they got massive amounts of backlash and they came out and said, whoa, that was a mistake. That was a mistake. And what we're seeing in Canada, what we're seeing with PayPal, what we're seeing with the banks is that your money that you think is your money is not your money. And at any time, they can decide to censor you or block it if they want.
And at the end of the day, if we don't have the ability to determine our own future for ourselves, for our family, on a monetary basis, we don't actually have any real control of anything in our own lives.
Bitcoin puts you back in the driver's seat of your life, which is why so many people see it as the ultimate force for good.
I absolutely believe that Bitcoin already is making the world a better place and will continue to do so in the coming years.
There's been plenty of examples of currency collapse just in the last 13 years since Bitcoin has existed. And we get these every single year. So there have been major, even middle-income nations where the currency has effectively failed, and Bitcoin has been a life raft for those people.
When the war in Ukraine broke out, I had friends there on the ground trying to help some folks that were stuck in bomb shelters, delivering food and water. And they asked us to help them monetarily, try to help them buy more supplies. On a Saturday night, the only way to get money into Ukraine was Bitcoin. There's no other technology that can cross borders outside of banking hours. So we were actually able to use Bitcoin to send it over there and get local currency to people on the ground and to effect humanitarian aid. And I was really blown away because Bitcoin was the only thing that could solve that problem. And in times of war, all philosophical resistance to things like Bitcoin goes out the window because it doesn't matter. If it solves your problem, you're going to use it. And that's what makes me really excited about it because there's so many problems in the world and those people really need the Bitcoin.
We decided to collect some donations in Bitcoin, and Bitcoin was a kind of a plan B for us. The very concept of Bitcoin is tightly connected to the concept of financial freedom for everyone in the world and give understanding that Bitcoin is a significant tool in a fight against global evil.
You know, when people go to protest, whether it's in Uzbekistan, in Russia, or Belarus, or Ukraine, or somewhere, it's important that you know that you have financial tool which cannot be turned off in the moment when you need it, when you need to be able to fight for your freedoms. And shouldn't be naive thinking that someone in your country would not abuse the power. One day it could happen. You have to be prepared.
Where you see Bitcoin expanding really fast is actually nations that need it the most. Right? You see why El Salvador is a natural is because they're most punished. They're furthest away from the monopoly system of money today. And so nations that have always seen either hyperinflation or dictators, and what you're seeing is those populations race into this open monetary protocol, and nobody can stop them. It is freedom.
These are places where the government has failed in some sense. And so a lot of critics think, oh, well, you know, Bitcoin is just something that, rich Westerners like, and it's a tool to gamble with. But really, the on-the-ground adoption is happening in places where people actually need it. And I think that's an extremely telling early data point.
And so, like, if you live in Nigeria, Nigeria has among the highest Bitcoin adoption rates in the world, like more than 30% of people use it. It's actually a very useful tool to do peer-to-peer transactions.
Bitcoin, when you look at its alternative as a money where you don't have to trust anyone and you can move it across countries, you can send it to your family. I've heard tons of stories from Argentinians on how they use Bitcoin to get around capital controls, to get around, government restricts the ability to move dollars in and out of the country, and Bitcoin is this fantastic alternative for that.
My country is ruled by the oldest military regime in Africa, same government in power for 57 years. And this is a brutal, rogue military regime that puts us under unimaginable amount of abuse and pain and control. Activists and dissidents arrested, killed, their bodies dumped in the sea. Countless of activists are jailed and have been in prison for years with no trial. Many others have disappeared, their families have never seen their body, and thousands others have fled the country, living in exile like myself. I see Bitcoin as a tool of political social, and economic liberation. The reason why is because the ideology behind Bitcoin in itself is judged toward giving monetary agency back to people, to citizens, no longer having people depend on banks and governments to control their money and determine its worth. We are also in a situation where, as citizens of our nation, our money is worth absolutely nothing outside of our borders. So when I see
Yeah, I want to comment on that because even when I was a child, I was questioning why is there a currency conversion? Like, why do we have to convert? Why is your money more powerful than ours? Like, why? What have you done? Anyway, so as a very questioning kind of individual, I always question anything anyway. So yeah, so why is the US dollar more powerful than the Philippine peso? Why is the euro more powerful than the US dollar and so on and so forth? So why? I mean, why? Like, why do we? Anyway, I just thought that Bitcoin will really solve that kind of inequality, like the inequality among currencies. So once we will have one global currency, then we get rid of these currency conversions, and we will all be equal. My money, if I use Bitcoin, I'm in the Philippines. If I go to a first world country, it should be the same. My Bitcoin should be valued the same. Okay, the same anywhere. Okay, it's not like when I go to the US, my peso has devalued, I don't know, 57 times. I don't know. It's like, yeah, it's unfair in a way.
Bitcoin, I see it as a tool that can allow us to put an end to this continuous colonial system that has maintained our countries and our people in bondage. The goal of my activism is to eventually get to a point where my people can live freely and in dignity. And that cannot be attained without financial freedom.
Definitely. To men is allotted what they earn, and to women what they earn.
Digital Sun Fund, which is my non-profit organization. What we do is trying to empowering young women and children in developing countries like Afghanistan. But there was an issue about that there was an inability to paying these women because many of these women didn't have a bank account, and we have to actually send the money to their male relatives' bank account. And many of these women sometimes says that they never received the money because once the money goes in the hands of the men and the relatives, they prefer to not give the money to the women. And why it's like that? Because in a conservative communities, some men are trying to control the lives of the women. And obviously, the first thing is that they don't want that the women have the financial freedom. So we heard about Bitcoin, and we thought, wow, we can use Bitcoin and send to the women directly, and they can have control of their own finance. That was interesting, and we deployed a Bitcoin wallet within our system. We created a user-friendly platform that was very easy for them to find where their wallet is, how much money they're making, and then what they can do with this money. Bitcoin has helped us bypass the physical and social barriers. If you have cell phones and smartphones and you have access to internet, you can have your bank with you everywhere. And that's why I think that the magic of the Bitcoin is.
Oh, that's amazing. So this is also advancing gender inequality, especially among women. In some countries, women are still considered second-class citizens. No, so yeah, that's an amazing development. So Bitcoin empowers women in those kind of countries, and that is really great. Correct oppression.
The Jews of Eastern Europe when the Nazis arrived, the Jews of Spain before that, Jews of Arab countries in the late 40s and early 50s. Jews were thrown out of Syria in huge numbers, thrown out of Egypt in huge numbers, with nothing, literally with nothing. Gosh, if they could have taken their digital wallets with them, what a beautiful thing that would have been.
Three things cannot be long the sun and moon.
I think Bitcoin is as much an ideology as it is a technology, but because it's an ethical ideology, there are many people that feel very spiritual about it and others that view it as a religion. If you worship truth, if you worship integrity, if you worship conservation of energy and balance in the universe, then Bitcoin is your religion.
Bitcoin.
Definitely. So, in my sometimes when I reflect on religion, yeah, sometimes you can see that Bitcoin even transcends religion, because in in the history of the world, as I told you before, religions seems to be a divisive factor. It doesn't really unite people, it divides us. And because there are so many gods and people have different beliefs and all kinds of faiths, okay? That's why I believe that Bitcoin is above even religion, okay? So because it is truth in its essence, like it's very a truth that is visible, a truth that is practical, a truth that everybody can experience. It's no longer just a belief, it's a reality, okay? And we can trust that truth. So that's why, it's like, in a way, it transcends religion.